Oké. Goedemorgen allemaal. Wat een mooie opkomst. Welkom allemaal. Mijn naam is Babah Tarawally. Voor diegenen die mij niet kennen, ik ben schrijver. Ik schrijf gewoon boeken. En ik ben ook journalist, columnist voor Dagblad Trouw. Maar ik sta hier vandaag als gespreksleider, de moderator. Wij zijn hier voor dit onderwerp die in de Sahel op dit moment gaande is. En waarom hebben we gekozen voor deze thema? Is naar aanleiding van een column die ik heb geschreven. En degenen die die column nog niet hebben gelezen, ik ga het in Engels doen, want vandaag gaan we hier over hebben in Engels. Ja? Dus ik heb de column vertaald in het Engels. Ik zal even voorlezen, want dat is de aftrap. It is the point of departure. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again. Let me just read this column I wrote a few weeks ago. Africa's youth is awakened and on the move. You cannot turn on the television without receiving news about Niger. With the recent coup that ousted a democratically elected president, the country is suddenly world news. And I too learned much more about it. My image of Niger was that of poverty and drought. Exactly what the media led me to believe. Bizarrely, Niger is one of the poorest countries in the world, and at the same time, with its rich resources, it provides our Western technological progress. Despite the poverty-stricken conditions in which much of its 25 million residents lives, Niger is home to a wealth of resources. Among them is uranium that serves as a major export to European countries, like France and the former colonizer. That more than 15% of the nuclear energy France produces is due to Niger. I did not know that the EU and the US have interest there because of the large supply of uranium was unknown to me. I also surprised by the enormously large American and French military presence with the goal of protecting the country and the region from jihadists. My question then is, right away, whether they are actually doing this for Niger or are there to defend their own interest. The latter seems more plausible to me. In the story that Western countries travel to Africa out of love and mercy to help poor people there, many Africans no longer believe. Nor in the story about creating or sustaining human rights and democratic principles. The West has lost credibility in Africa. How could this have happened? If I were an eye specialist, I would offer the following simple explanation. The young generation in Africa seems to have undergone cataract surgery. The cloudy lenses of their eyes have been replaced with artificial lenses. As a result, they are seeing sharper than their parents and grandparents who were blinded by post-colonial depression. And if not just that, they now see better. They now know better how it is that they are poor while living in the richest continent. Many Africans think that rich Western countries deploy smart tools like democracy and development aid in Africa in exchange for the resources. And who benefit from that? A handful of elites and their families. This is the reason why the majority receive the military coups. They receive the military coups, which follow each other in rapid succession with loud cheers. For many, they are the right means to replace Western puppets with young military personnel. Whether they are indeed the answer is guesswork, because we cannot see into the future. If statistics are to be believed, 60% of the entire African continent is under the age of 25. And predictions show that by the year 2030, their numbers will increase by 42%. This means that the future of Africa is in the hands of the youth, and they are in charge. And is it mainly this youth who support the military coups? Young people are calling on mass for Western countries to stop interfering in Africa, pointing especially to France as the culprit. Bob Marley expressed this beautifully in one of his lyrics. You can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. The youth of Africa are awakened and on the move. Nothing seems to stop them. Their future is now. The question is whether the West is willing to accept their future. Thank you. So it was a very straightforward column, and the column was much more to provoke. That's what columnists do. So it makes you sharper to think. Yep. So before we go further, I would like to invite my good friend, Oyunga Pala. He's a journalist, editor from Kenya, to reflect on this column. You're welcome.
How much time do you have, Babah? 5 minutes. 5 minutes. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for first of all, for the organization for inviting me. It's good to see such a large audience in an early morning. I'd like to start by saying that I'm not a Sahel expert. So I come from Kenya. I work for a publication known as the Elephant.info, and we're a Pan-African organization, and we look into Pan-African narratives, and we're very big on crafting new futures for Africa. Babah's column is a bit dated. It was written in August. It came off the back of 3 particular coups. There was a coup in Mali, there's a coup in Burkina Faso, and then there's a coup in Niger. And the response, there was a lot on African social media, was a younger generation seemed to be supporting the coups. And immediately, for example, in a space like ours in Kenya and Nairobi, there was already a generational conflict. For a generation like mine who's above 45, who had lived actually through coups. In Kenya, we went through a coup in 1982. The entire region has pretty much gone through coups. Most of the 80s, Africa was seen as the capital of coups. So a lot of the people then, immediately the older people, called out the naivety of the youth, saying, you don't understand coup leaders. There's a very kind of short window of euphoria, and then the same old games play back. So that's just one version of events. But the youth was saying something that was a little more deeper that I think didn't get captured in typical mainstream media narratives. Part of the celebration of what we saw across the Sahel, you notice a lot of the leaders then who came into power through these military coups were people who were young. I think the oldest amongst them was somebody was like 40 in Niger, but everybody else was in their 30s and much younger. So there's a sense of excitement that relived, particularly for those around Burkina Faso, those who remember the times of the 70s and 80s when leaders like Thomas Sankara rose to power through military power, leaders like Yoweri Museveni rose to power through military power. Then they represented hope. And this hope is kind of very interesting to note because it is, for a lot of African youth, democracy has become a sham. The series and series of electoral ballot democracies going on, but what happens is that the technology has become completely entrapped by an elite and we're going into kind of like an elite concession. So it doesn't really matter who you're changing, but the systems then tend to remain. So for a lot of the youth in Africa, they literally see democracy as a sham. So anything then that offers an alternative to that democracy is grabbed at with hope. Nobody is naive to think that a military leader will come in and change everything at once. However, what everybody is looking for, especially what the young people are looking for, is literally beacons of hope because they are fighting for their lives. And the African situation is particularly dire because in Kenya, for example, during our last election, which was widely disputed, but largely endorsed by the West, a lot of the young people then, literally 8 million people didn't vote. They were known as kind of the silent majority. The question was, why didn't they vote? When we speak to most of them, especially from the point of an editor and a publisher, is they all say, nothing's going to change. It's pointless. It's a waste of time. It's literally a waste of time. If you've heard about Cambridge Analytica experimented in Africa, literally in my country. It was the experimental ground for. So what we were seeing happening in Donald Trump's election, we had been basically the guinea pigs of it in Kenya. So people do not trust elections at all, right? These are mere games that they take, the elite use to keep people entrapped. So what the youth are basically saying around this, and the conversation around this coups, what is appearing to be some kind of jubilation around coups, is merely a generation fighting for their lives. They're basically entrapped. They're entrapped in a governance system where there's not much hope. Education systems have basically been decapitated. Healthcare system is gone. You know, every other young person is trying to get out of Africa for an opportunity in the West. But what happens when you try to get the West? It's incredibly difficult, first of all, to make the journey. If you're lucky to actually get to the West, to work your way up the system and sustain yourself is also incredibly difficult. So this is the crisis of the African youth. Now, as a person who's in the interest of narratives and narratives for the future, we started paying a lot of attention to what we call the Generation Z. We're paying a lot of attention to them for one particular reason. One is that they're the first generation that has entirely grown up within a technological infrastructure. They also do not have the baggage of, colonial nostalgia, as, say, my parents would have. When we were growing up and we were being taught in school, we were taught about the benefits of colonialism. These young people don't have that problem. They are challenging this narrative very in every little way they can through social media. So I think Africa is an interesting place to watch right now, right? The youth might not be in a position to articulate all the issues in one voice, but they're talking. If you go beyond the main media narratives and walk down to social media, into TikTok, into Instagram, you'll find where the real rich voice lives. And I think Africa's future rests with this group. They might not organized in the way we think of organization, but they are coming. And they're not going to fall for the old narratives any longer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Actually, you had 10 minutes, but because you're an African, I give you 5. So thank you. You had 10 minutes. Okay. I'm joking. Okay, in the panel, we have 3 very important speakers. And I would like to start with calling them to come over. They know themselves. And the first one is Tijmen Rooseboom. He is the Sahel envoy for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we have Dr. Otieno Ong'ayo. Am I saying it good? Ong'ayo. Okay, sorry. And then we have the only lady in the panel, Lourdes Lobede. Please go. Now this is the middle. Okay, we are not going to waste time. Tijmen.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
You've had me speaking.
Yes.
And you have Mr. Pala.
Yeah.
So what did come into your head?
A lot of things.
A lot of things.
Babah, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me and having me here. Yeah, okay, you said it was provoking, and it worked. As in, I thought indeed it was. You made some very in the column, but also of course in the response. There's some very very valid points there, in the sense of that we all see in the Sahel actually a sort of a generational shift happening. You know, it's not business as usual. There's something going on. There is a young generation that is demanding their voice to be heard. That's demanding to get opportunities. That's demanding actually a government that listens to them and that responds to them. And we see that happening right now. In the future is, well, you're saying youth are the future. Well, it's the situation is right now. So I do feel that that some of the issues that they're raising, you know, let's not sugarcoat it, they are a lot of it is correct, as in the feelings of feeling, like I said, a government that's not responding, an unfair system, perhaps an unfair global system, governance an issue, a sort of a focus on elections that were not actually delivering. Yesterday we were in a debate and we were talking, and it was actually all about refounding the state, sort of a complete overhaul, so to say. And you feel that sort of energy, that sort of criticism amongst young people. I've also experienced it on my travels, actually, going to a university and talking to young people, and they're actually, they were grilling me. You know, they were taking all of the problems that they see with the attitude of the international community, the attitude of their own leaders, and a sort of a cocktail of a feeling that they were not being listened to, and a feeling that they were not getting an opportunity, and they were grilling me for it, and I understand.
Okay,
So
talking about the Dutch, okay, and how is the Dutch being received in the region?
Well, I think the Dutch are generally, we're quite neutral. we're still quite well received. Because of a lot of our programs, are actually focused on the population. If you look at our development cooperation, it's very much focused on women groups, on youth and civil society, and not necessarily, you know, like this with the governments. And that is something that a lot of people know. We are not, well, that one country that you also mentioned, our southern neighbor that is, of course, in the European Union, France, and a very important partner for us, but has a very, let's call it diplomatically, a difficult relationship in the Sahel currently, difficult situation. And I'm not saying that we are completely immune to that, but I do think that for a lot of the people, they see that the Netherlands is a different player, a more neutral player, really focused towards the people and trying to talk and trying to listen.
If you say focusing on the people,
yeah,
does that mean that you are the ones triggering all these things happening in those areas? and the French are having the attack, and Dutch is on the ground?
No, not at all. Focusing on the people doesn't mean instigating revolution, if that's what you mean. No, it actually means trying to support at more of a community level with civil society, trying to work on all these things. You're talking about education, lack of jobs, difficult health situation, trying to support people to in that regard. But also, indeed, well, maybe there, you know, it's not saying it's a revolution, but actually trying to work with young people to listen to them. Mm-hmm. You know, we have a very specific policy in which we are more focused on, it's called Youth at Heart, and I used to work on that, so it's very close to my heart still. Talking with young people and listening to young people, really as a part of our foreign policy.
Have we learned from what is happening, the Dutch? Are we learning from that? And if yes, what are we going to do differently?
Yeah, I think we have. I think we have all learned. Currently in the Sahel, to be frank, we really see that the international community is trying to find its feet. You know, it's difficult how to deal with those coup regimes. I have a small nuance there, if you allow me a bit later, but we're all trying to find our feet. Obviously, the sort of a militarized response and the sort of a system that was felt as if it was imposed from outside didn't work. Okay. So we are trying to see how we can better position ourselves, but it's currently, honestly, not easy.
Okay. One question last for you.
Yeah.
Are you happy that the Organization of Africa, the OAU or African Union, didn't intervene militarily in those countries?
Yeah. So
are you happy about that?
That they didn't intervene. Yes, there's not a military solution. No, we're happy. We want a political solution that is in the end what is needed. We're not there yet, by the way, still, Niger. Yeah. But just one thing, you know, you were mentioning. I agreed with you on a lot of things about the situation of the young people. That is the feelings that they have this gerontocracy that they're up against, so to say. That it's a real thing. I perhaps maybe nuance a little bit, and the second speaker also did that. The idea that it is very popular. It is true that now there's a lot of popularity, but I would love to hear from the other speakers and from you. I sometimes find it a little bit difficult to immediately go along with everyone is happy and the youth is happy. These are military coups.
Okay.
Let's not forget that, you know? They came on power with the barrel of the, not literally with a lot of force, but they're military. Okay. So it makes it difficult. We see civil society under pressure. We see youth groups under pressure. So it's a bit too easy to just say, everyone supports.
I must say, I agree with you because I got a lot of attack for people saying, yeah, not everybody's happy, not everybody's happy. You're making as if everybody's happy. But of course,
but it's a valid discussion.
And it's what we see in the media, the enthusiasm and the people we see, and we react on that. But there's somebody here who is originally from Gabon, and right?
No, Equatorial Guinea.
Equatorial Guinea, sorry.
And Congo.
Congo.
That one was not in the middle.
No. Sorry for that. Equatorial Guinea. So take your time. Equatorial Guinea. And what is your response?
I've heard a few ideas that are very important. First of all, let me just quickly introduce myself. I'm a global capacity builder in the sense of empowering people to be more efficient in the workplaces as well as the organizations to be more productive as well. I'm an African entrepreneur, and I also have a manpower organization because I felt the commitment to work on helping people to help themselves. And the best way to do that is by providing work opportunities for not only the young and older people as well, but throughout the region. Having said this, I have three main ideas to what is being said. First, for me, the coups have a very, very clear message. And the message is enough. Enough. That's what coups are for. It's enough. What is working, what is being at the moment, what is the current reality no longer works for us. This is the message. They're definitely not the solution, and there shouldn't be the way or the way of choice for people to get into power. But this happens when when there's no real power in the people. When I read about the pressure of democracy in the Sahel, I burst into laugh because there is no democracy. What pressure on what democracy are we talking about? Having the right to vote is not a democracy. Having an elected freely elected president is not democracy.
What is democracy then?
No, democracy is the power on people. When you have all the powers combined in one person, that is dictatorship. No matter where I have freely elected that person to represent me, it's still a dictatorship because I don't have the power in the judicial system. There is no power of law, no rule of law. There is no representation of my interest in parliament, and the constitution that says or that sets up the rules of how we play is being made by, it's a copy-paste of a constitution taken in France in the 1950s and copy-paste in my country. And it was not made for me, it's not my reality, and it certainly does not work for me. Guess who is it working for? The people that made it. The people that make those
So
rules.
it's outdated. The constitutions you are using is outdated.
Not only updated, but they serve the purpose of the power. Information is power. Knowledge is power. The people that know how the rules are the people that created those rules. And those people are somewhere in the West and not in the countries where that constitution
It's very interesting what you are saying now, because even the anti-gay laws we have in Africa, most of the time, it's been from the West.
Yes.
During colonial time. So
And
we forget that.
And this is one of the things that the copy-paste cannot be working. You were talking about before about the lenses of how the media portrays what is happening in the Sahel. We are looking with our Western eyes into a reality that we do not know. And we need different lenses so we can see all the spectrum of the real issues that are happening there. And the solutions cannot be a copy-paste from somebody else's playbook.
But what do you think is a good solution?
The good solution is the knowledge. The knowledge needs to be shared within the population. When other parties come into here, say, no, we're coming to aid, we're coming to do this, we're coming to do that. First of all, I feel a little bit cringe about the paternalistic approach about that, because it's more of an empowering. But the way to empower someone is to teach them how to do things. This is the old thing of don't give me fish, show me how to fish. But if people don't know what are their rights, if people don't know how to get those rights, if people don't know how to make themselves heard, how can you tell people to, I'm coming to help you? They're still in ignorance, and ignorance is what brings all the rest of the issues.
Okay, I will ask time to react just shortly on her, then I go to Dr. Otieno.
Yeah, well, maybe not going to respond to all of it, but just some things that popped into my head when listening to you is, on the one hand, I was wondering, you're saying the people in the West, they still have all the power, or at least that's a bit what I understood. I wanted just for clarification, because of course I know there's a lot of agency, of course, in all of the African countries and Sahelian countries as well. There's a lot of yesterday was the same sorry, but my head is in the debate I also had yesterday, because it was a lot about all the security challenges in the Sahel come from outside. And I'm not very much in favor of that frame. Like, I do realize that there's a huge impact of let's say, the global system, and especially the remains and the structure as it still stands, the sort of post-colonial structure as it's still there, which is not helpful at all. But I do feel a little bit unease if there is almost like no agency within the countries, and it's all the problems are, let's say, from the outside. And I'm not saying that you're saying that, but I was just wondering, because I heard that, and that was it's a question. And the second one is, I just wanted to say it's an NIMD debate. Let me be a bit in defense of democracy. It's people also in the Sahel, they still want, we see that from Afrobarometers and other research, people still want democracy, just not these, they want better democracy. Yep. Democracy is not just elections, it's about accountability, it's about protecting minorities, it's about freedom of press, there's a lot around it. People still want that. People still want that system. So I'm not going to go along with a sort of that's gone. People don't want that. That's not true.
Okay. No, it's not true, because if I can just relate to Sierra Leone, where I'm from, we had an election, and the present president won the election, which was, for the West, they said, no, it's not a good election. But African Union said, okay, we approve it. And what happened? The West stopped sending money. So they've not been sending money. So there was a lot of poverty. People are suffering until the opposition has been talked to, and now money is coming back from the West. So there is this dependency from Africa on Western countries who support the project, and that brings imbalance. Yeah. So what I will do, I will go to Dr. Otieno. You are a political scientist. I will give you the floor to react on what you heard. Carry on.
Yeah, thanks so much. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming this morning to listen to each other. It's always at points where we ask, why are we here? And why are we talking about this subject? Why are we discussing Africa in Amsterdam?
Good.
They're telling us what happens, the narratives we had. That's just a manifestation of something. But why is it a constant for Europe or for the Netherlands? That should be the question. So those things happening there, they have a history. There's some underlying conditions. Any sick person visiting a doctor has to go through some diagnostic process, physical and laboratory and name it, in order to find out what is the problem with the patient. So there's an issue here, and it's not new. So-called instability in Africa, political instability is so-called, is not a recent thing. And we've seen waves of different dynamics there. But what does it mean? And what does it mean for us? And that's why are we here? My first response would be, until we start to recenter humanity in our way of looking at things, then we might not find a solution. Are we talking about the same humanity or a different humanity? A Dutch person or an African or a Nigerian or someone from Equatorial Guinea or Kenya or Tanzania, what's the difference there? Until we put back humanity in our discussion, then we can start to speak. We have a policy at the Dutch government for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, international advice for the government, where we had a policy brief on youth unemployment and digitalization in Africa. And when we were working on that policy brief, I asked the question, why are we focused on the youth in Africa? What about the youth in the Netherlands? That's where we should start. But there's a notion that the youth there are different from the youth here. Students of different levels. But if you go to Africa, you'll find them listening to the same music, watching the same things, dressing in the same way. There's nothing they don't do that the youth here don't do, because they have a smartphone, a 4G phone. Some are doing things for international companies. They're innovating new apps for addressing different things. But we still have this old lens, our braille. That's what I'm asking us to take away, this braille, and have many brailles, not one. Because it's so complex. And the complexity is because we are connected to that complexity. We are interconnected, whether we like it or not, as a humanity. That's why if I find what is important for me, how comes it's not important for you? And when the youth are shouting there and responding, there's an underlying condition. And the Dutch youth of the same age is busy with studies and other possibilities of traveling, taking 1 year out. You don't need 200 years to provide for human needs. We always told that no, because we are advanced, it took us ages to be where we are. But there was some visionary leadership in the Netherlands that gave us this possibility. That was always my question when I came to this country. What was the vision that made us to have this possibility? And it comes to the many points that have been raised about what does democracy mean? Mm-hmm. And it sounds, the whole systems in Africa, for example, sounds the same, reads the same, but it doesn't produce the same. It's a Westphalian nation-state system from 1800, which created all these structures we have. But the frame, if you make a tart, a cake, there's a form for it. It can have the same shape, but the ingredient can be very different. So that's why...
If I can just, because of time,
yeah, come on.
You've said a very important thing which I want us to really let it sink in our mind. Comparing the youth here and the youth there. They're not different. And we see that many youth in Africa have problems coming over to Europe, while the European kids here, they can easily go the other side. So we are asking why the frustration. So if we are asking about equal lenses, looking at the youth here and the youth there. So the question is to us all, are we fair enough? The humanity you're talking about, are we taking a humane approach to looking at development aid, looking at the order? Are we doing that? Tijmen, please.
I certainly do hope so. It is, yeah, I would say yes. I mean, a humane approach in the end means a sort of like I said, a sort of a people-centered approach, one that is focused on, really rooted within society, very often quite localized, and that is something that we do see, that we do try. We can get better, and I'm really very much talking about our development cooperation. Of course, as ministry, we are also diplomats. We of course have some. With this famous 3 Ds of defense and diplomacy and development, but very much focusing on the development here. I would say, yeah, we try to focus on communities, on youth, for example, youth entrepreneurs. I find that always very interesting, also in my previous job, because you saw that a lot of those young entrepreneurs, perhaps a bit different from from here in the Netherlands. If we're talking about a lot of the wishes and aspirations of young people worldwide are exactly the same. But of course, sometimes it's a bit different in how it manifests. I visited a lot of these young entrepreneurs, a lot of these startups. They're super critical. They are not, maybe here in the Netherlands, we can sometimes think that businesses and entrepreneurs and politics are like two different discussions. I really noticed in a lot of countries, also in the Sahel, this was very much intertwined. These were all young people trying to make a difference, trying to create a new system, so to say, trying to create space for themselves economically. They're also the ones who are making their voice heard. They're also the ones who are going to the street and trying to show that their voice matters. So these are all ways in which I think we try to have the humanity, so to say, within our, and the people centered, you know, and it's working on free press in Mali, we have youth advisory committees in all of our embassies in the Sahel. With NIMD, we work on democracy schools. And with, for example, SMV, we work with youth in local communities. All of this is, I would hope, and I would say, a human-focused approach.
Look at this. Are you seeing that human approach? Guinea-Bissau.
Equatorial Guinea.
I'm just getting it wrong.
I'm not, you know, I'm not going to go into the realities of the different countries because I think different countries have their different circumstances and stuff. But I'm trying to look at the base, as my counterparts just said, looking at the commonalities across board, because when we're looking at those lenses, yes, we make that differentiation between the youth in Europe and the youth in Africa, but within Africa, there is no comparison. Right now, I know that we are all seeing in the same lenses, even though we are 54 or 55 countries in the continent, we are still seeing as just one. So, but let me address one of the elephants in the room. And one of them is, who benefits from all this? I think this is really the question in the Sahel and everywhere. Who is benefiting from all this?
From the chaos?
From the chaos, from the underdevelopment of countries. Because it's very good to go and say, yeah, let's talk about democracy and stuff like that. But I don't care about democracy if I don't have anything to eat. I don't care about democracy if I don't have a job.
Do you share that?
I don't care about democracy if I cannot go to school. So what are the tools that you are giving me so I can exercise my right to democracy? And just to make one thing, I'm not against democracy. What I said before is what we are calling democracy, it is not.
Okay.
I am pro-democracy in the right way, and also I'm pro-democracy in a different way, in a way that looks at my particularities, my idiosyncrasy, the context where I live, and shapes it to my benefit, not to the benefit of others.
I think Thijs Berman had a lot of work to do. The director of the Land Institute for Democracy is here. He's the last speaker. So I think he's taking note. He will come back to that.
Okay.
Let me give you the last word.
Yeah, for me, you're asking very fundamental questions. Who benefits? And it's back to my point on humanity. Until we realize, where do we get our indifference from? When something happens to him, it doesn't matter to me. That's where it goes wrong. Europe and Africa are very much interconnected in terms of geographical proximity. It's different from the United States. If Africa is burning, Europe will burn in one way or the other. If your neighbor's house is burning, don't think it is too far away from you. Europe is much closer to Africa than many other places.
We don't realize that.
Fact.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's potentials in Africa, there are potentials in Europe. But we have never seen it as such, because the lens we adopted was more of a linear kind of framework where we were conquering, dominating, exploiting, and so on. And that's the logic. When we talk about circularity, shared prosperity, if he's safe and he's safe, I'm safe. But what makes us to go into that direction until we center humanity, the value of the other person? I cannot do anything good towards you if I don't value you. I cannot listen to you if you're not important. This is where we need a paradigm shift in how we look at Africa in total, but also how Africa is interconnected with Europe. Forgetting the past, there's a history. a history which is painful, and in the Sahel, they're rightly pointing out that.
Okay.
But the point is, we are here as Dutch or as the Netherlands. That's for my point now. I always ask, when I tell some of our students, when I see them in the lecture hall, I say, I'm very happy to see you here. You know why I say that? If you get it right in this lecture hall as a Dutch student, the Netherlands will benefit, because you'll be able to understand how the world is working. When you meet an African youth with the similar aspirations, you'll connect and start to work together, especially when you value each other. And we will sort it out in policy, we'll sort up in trade relations, we'll go into other elements, people-to-people relations, solidarity of alliances. People used to support each other. Why? Because we are very much interconnected to the foods we eat, spicy bone from Kenya, flowers from Kenya, from Ethiopia, name it. We have so much that comes from elsewhere that contributes to our own Geselligkeit.
Doctor, I would like to go further. I would like to hear you 1-2 hours talking, but time is not on our side. So just a little bit, then I want to let these people ask questions.
Sorry, yeah, but I was really triggered, of course, by this, apart from the fact that I want to listen for 1 or 2 hours, just the fact that you are in a way, and I have to do that pitch, in a way emphasizing our Africa strategy that we launched as the government, which is much more about listening. It's more about a different way of looking at the continent, a more, let's say, 21st century broader way of looking at the continent. So just wanted to say, and then being more also about modesty and honesty and transparency. You know, these are things that are important in our relations, because if you're saying, yeah, who benefits? I was also triggered by that from the instability, but we're not. Okay. So because we're completely interconnected. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Questions? Okay, I see. Please help me. The lady in red. Yes. Yeah, please.
Thank you. I was very worried about what is happening in Sudan now, with a very ominous number of 6 up to 7 million people and refugees within Sudan and across the border towards Chad, risk of genocide, massive ethnic violence and rape, and what can we do against that? We cannot just listen. What does the African Union want to do? And is there any cooperation possible between the European Union, NATO, and the African Union for humanitarian intervention, which is very urgent?
Thank you very much for your question. Yes. So, who wants to answer?
Yeah.
Sudan, the genocide, and what is happening there. We cannot leave that untouched.
No, I mean we are not leaving that untouched. It is absolutely gut-wrenching to see what's happening there, and I also have to be honest that I'm not the biggest Sudan expert. So, and I know actually one of my colleagues who is in the building today. But just to say that we are indeed working very much on a resolution also within the EU, as we are part of the EU, trying to push for a resolution and also trying to extend our humanitarian aid, because it's a humanitarian disaster. I was in Chad recently, where you actually see that the refugees are flowing over the country, coming from Darfur, and you're seeing it's really horrendous, and it's already very vulnerable, very poor regions that have no capacity to deal with that. A humanitarian system, let's be honest, that is being overstretched at the moment. That's a lot of demands and not enough funds, and it is really a horrible situation. But whether the EU can intervene, or your suggestion, I don't know.
This is a very complicated one.
Yes.
I think your question is addressing a very urgent human need or a situation, but it is a question touching on a very fundamental thing that is happening. There are some conditions which I talked about. It's not just a treatment. There's something already under. We need to have a preventive measure. We need to provide the conditions which doesn't give room for those kind of outcomes. Should be our focus. We need to act to intervene, to give relief, But we need to go to the foundations. And in the Africa strategy policy, which we've been working on also, the question of governance comes back all the time. And governance and democracy are also interlinked. But the question is, what do we mean with it? What kind of model of governance works for the people there? If you read the works of Patrick Chabal, who worked about disorder in Africa, that there's always, within disorder, things can also function. But the fact that things don't happen or function in the way we know it doesn't mean they don't function. So if we look at things there with our own lenses and experience here, we might not see anything.
So we have to go back to the drawing board.
Yes, and then we think of two strategies. Bringing relief for these emergent situations, but addressing the fundamental conditions which generates those conditions we are talking about.
Thank you. I saw we have, yes? Yep.
Good morning. First of all, it was very nice listening to you all. I have a question about, now you see also a very pro-Russia sentiments appearing, especially in Burkina, Mali, Niger also now. How do you see that? Is that just the opposite of against Western forces, so you become pro-Russian, or is there more behind all this?
I think I will answer that question. Yeah, I think I think let's don't make the mistake. People are not in favor of Russia. They are against. They're not in favor, but they're against France and most European policies we've talked about here. Yeah. That's what they're against. And Russia is just a maneuver to just say, well, let's use that. But it's not that they really want Russia. You know, that's my take on it. Hey, let me see. You at the back, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Abakula Arkalalis. I am from Niger. Just I want to ask if I allowed to speak in Dutch, because my English is not very well.
Okay, so carry on.
Okay. Ik heb gewoon vragen aan de Sahel-experts.
I have a question to the Sahel expert here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Een paar jaar terug was ook een Afrika-dag. Op dat moment was de heer Koenders aangesteld als de leider van MINUSMA. Ik heb hem persoonlijk gesproken over MINUSMA. Ik ben van het volk Tuaregs. Toen is MINUSMA in Kidal gekomen. Nu, een paar weken geleden, is MINUSMA weg. Na zoveel jaren. Na vertrek van MINUSMA heeft Mali Kidal terug gekregen van separatisten en de terroristen. Dus mijn vraag aan de Sahel-experts zijn, wat zijn de resultaten van MINUSMA na alle die jaren?
Okay,
zijn daar tevreden mee?
Oké, dankjewel. Misschien kun je gewoon kort een antwoord geven op... ja?
Yeah.
Yeah, please, in English, please.
Is it okay for you to understand English? Okay. Otherwise, it would have been a very boring last hour for you. So happy to hear that. This is, of course, very unsatisfactory, to put it mildly, what's happening now in Mali with MINUSMA. We're seeing that the Algiers Accords are actually also very much under pressure. And that is what we are all working on. And with MINUSMA, of course, currently leaving, the way they're leaving is also very, very sad to say. After all that investment, after all that time, the way that it's a hasty retreat, so to say, and it's very sad to see that. Just to get the bilan now, what it is exactly. Of course, this is not a satisfactory moment. I always find it a bit difficult to say that means it was a failure, because of course there's been years when there was progress, and these years for people have been real. So I do want to emphasize that, but I can't say that this feels like a good moment for Mali and also not for the UN. But let's also talk a little bit more.
Precisely.
today.
I think you guys have a lot to talk about. Yeah? Okay, then I'm going to the last speaker. I'm sorry. I really want to go further with questions, but we don't have time. Yeah? After the last speaker, we can go to questions, please. After the last speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, let me invite Thijs Berman.
Yeah. You want us to go?
I think we need
So thank you very much. Let's give them applause.
That's a lot. Where's Babah? Yeah.
Are you expecting this?
Oof. Good morning. My name is Thijs Berman. I am the Executive Director of the Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy, and I am supposed to react on what has been said here so far, which is quite a lot. So I'm a bit embarrassed. As a secondary person, I would like to have 2 days to reflect and then be able to say very nice one-liners. I'll improvise and get there. Babah, we had this discussion in preparing this, and I strongly agreed with your op-ed in which you said that we have an impatient young generation. I totally agree. And I also very much agreed with Lourdes Lobede. Where's Lou? Oh yeah. When you said, Lou, that there was no functioning democracy. So what democracy under pressure? Pressure without democracy, or without a functioning democracy. I very much agreed also with Oyunga when you said a sham. It was a sham. Obviously it was a sham. Democracy carries 2 promises. The first promise is your political rights will be respected. Everyone has an equal right to be at a table where decisions are taken. It was not the case. The second promise is democracy will in some way bring a respect for the social contract, something like a social justice that most people agree about. That's the second promise. And what we see is 20, 30 years after the end of the bigger dictatorships in Central America, in Latin America, in Africa, the people had their political rights, yes, but where was social justice? So 1, 2 generations after the end of the dictatorships in the 90s, the young people, they have their mobile phones, they have the information, they are informed and disinformed very strongly on Facebook. Facebook equals internet in most African countries. And they are the impatient generation. They see how it can be elsewhere. And they see that their democracy is not functioning, that the elites have very well served themselves.
But are they seeing also injustice?
Yes, and it is all the more injustice as they know that France, and behind France, the European Union, and within the European Union, the Netherlands as well, we have accepted these elites to be self-serving at these extreme and obscene points. Huh? So when one of our students in the democracy schools that we have in Burkina Faso, for instance, a year ago, I spoke with these people, with our students, and they said, one of them said, we choose Putin, we choose Moscow, we choose communism. Okay? I tried to explain the difference between kleptocracy and communism, but it didn't land very well because of the very difficult position we are in, having supported these elites for such a long time. And today it's more complicated even because we get signals from our country offices. The NIMD has 14 country offices throughout the world, Central America, Latin America, Africa, Middle East. They tell us that as long as we do not speak out sharper and clearer about the horrendous bombings in Gaza today, we will lose all credibility for the next decade speaking about democracy and human rights. So I needed to touch this subject as well, if you don't mind. And no, I do not excuse any terrorist attack anywhere. I mean, it's obvious to state the obvious about the terrorist attack by Hamas in Israel. I have relatives over there. I know this is not what we want. So what do we do then? Not pull out. We are in a new phase of decolonization. That's how I see it. And it is a good thing that these elites are thrown out. Sometimes by other elites, like in Gabon, Révolution de Palais. One replaces another. Yes, it's the family Bongo is out, but the man who took over has served the family for decades. But you see the hope. And I really see it as Africa knowing that it is in a multipolar world, it has a choice, and it's time to change. And that's what they want. And you saw these statistics on still there is support for democracy. 3/4 of the population of the African continent. But they are in despair about their democrats. I'm not afraid of dictators at all. I'm afraid of democrats who fail their responsibility. Like in the Netherlands, on Groningen, or toeslagenschandaal. I'm afraid of these democrats because they offer a fertile ground for populists and dictators. And that's what I liked about what you said about the humanity. We need to see humanity and the parallels between the Netherlands or any other Western rich country and African countries. When people get mistrustful against their own democrats, you see it in the Netherlands as well. And of course, we are immensely much richer, etc., etc. But you need to tackle this by a different type of leadership, by getting participatory democratic approaches and not sham participatory approaches, as we also know in the Netherlands. And then you will gain some support back, perhaps.
As you speak,
Yes.
you get me emotional because
Yes, angry.
we are in the, not really angry, it's
Yeah.
because there's no way out. It seems no way out. And that's what is really making this youth angry. It seems there's no way out. Because the military we are seeing also is not a way out. It's just like putting a plaster on the wound.
No, but you cannot just run away by saying, oh, military, we're against the military. That does not work. If you accept the idea that this is a new phase in decolonization, then you have to stand at the right side of history and not go away. So that's why NIMD, our organization, Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy, we decide to stay. And I was called by the, I was at a ceremony of graduation of our students in Bamako. And so 50 young, enthusiastic people who said, we are going to restore, to rebuild our democracy after the second coup d'etat. Very enthusiastic, very motivated. Our former director of our office is here in the room, Miriam Chassing, and she has built up this all in a fantastic way, Miriam. And the Minister of Education was there as well, appointed by the military. And he came to me and said, tomorrow morning, to my office. Okay. So Miriam's successor, Celia Dalmeida, and me, we went there to this ministry and we thought, okay, it's over. He just kicked out all the French NGOs. We were a bit nervous. And he said, yes. I've discussed this with the whole government yesterday afternoon. And I have to tell you, we would want you to stay. Because you are not working for French interests. You're not working for Dutch interests. You are working for our interests. Okay. You are training our young people to take over and to bring the democratic transition to success. Okay? And we want you to work much closer with the Ministry of Education and have an agreement, a memorandum of understanding. And hola, hola, hola. On ne se marie pas tout de suite quand même. So, I made him understand that NIMD needs to be very independent and impartial and stay clear of any political actor to be able to play our role as an impartial trainer, not taking sides. He understood, accepted. So NIMD is today almost the only NGO visible in Malian media speaking out in favor of this return to democratic constitutional order in the country.
Thijs,
Yes.
I need to give time so that we have 2 questions for you
Yeah.
before we close, because we are running out of time. So I saw 2 hands. People are trying to, yeah? The guy at the back. Please, the one at the back.
Good morning. My name is Ismail Abaji. I'm from Senegal. And I want to talk a bit about democracy. In our African culture, the democracy that the West want to force it, I can say it like this. You know, in Africa, we never give a name to a baby who are not yet born. So before we talk about democracy, I think we need to talk first about independence. Why I say independence? Because if you look back between Germany and France, Germany was occupying France. And what France did to be independent, he come in Africa, he took our ancestor and they fight for the independence of France. You know, and France become an independent country. But yeah, I will come to ask a question.
Because of time, yeah.
Okay, so if you look, I want to say about this democracy. I think is the Western culture.
Okay.
So the question is, I want to say, what does it mean, democracy, the etymological meaning of the democracy? Because the democracy I know is not matching with racism. You know, I can say is coming from US.
Okay, let's give
Ismail.
Yes, let's give him the chance to give an answer, please. Thank you for the question.
Is democracy a Western thing? The African Union has enshrined democratic values, rule of law, in all of its documents. Virtually every constitution of an African country accepts, supports this value of democratic order. I do not see how in a dictatorship social justice will ever happen. I don't know of any dictatorship that takes care of the population, takes very well care of the very few at the top. It never tackles corruption. It never tackles mismanagement. Dictatorships don't do that. Only democracies can support social justice, some sort of checks and balances, but then you need a good court of auditors, you need all these institutions in place and supported. Dictatorships don't do that. Countries with free media do that, and free media are only existing in democracies. So,
I just have to make it shorter for you, because you are saying something which is very, I agree with the man what he's saying there, that the type of democracy we are talking about. Because if we look at, let me just make an example which perhaps people not like. Let's take Rwanda as an example. It's not very democratic, but there are a lot of things being done for the people in the country itself in terms of development. Is that also something we can say is democracy?
you know, right after the genocide in '94, I think the whole world understood that Kagame installed a hard leadership in order to make an end to the, I don't use an adjective here, it's too horrible, to the situation and to change it, okay? So we all had an understanding for this. And I think we're now over almost 30 years later.
Mm-hmm. So because many Africans support Kagame,
Yeah, of
many,
course.
not all,
But
the type of democracy is...
The country would be so much stronger if he would allow opposition, if he would allow free media, so much stronger. But he is afraid that the hate speech would come up again. I understand that, and still the country needs to develop it.
But we are silent from the West when it comes to...
Sorry?
We are silent from the West when it comes to Kagame.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a reason for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Yeah. Yep. What? You join the question together? Okay. Oh, sorry. I'll come to you.
I wanted to ask.
Oh, can you please tell me who you are?
I'm Ida Sar. I'm Miriam Jossing's daughter. I lived my whole life in Africa and 9 years in the Sahel in Mali.
Yes.
I am part of Gen Z, and I mingled a lot, not that much with the youth outside of my international schools in my bubble, but I knew the people that I did associate with had some ideas that would be that kind of go over with the same ones outside of my bubble. My question is, we talk about Gen Z as if we can lead them to the right path for the future because we are the future, especially Gen Z in Africa. But if we look at the history of Africa, how the West has kind of brutalized the people that have tried to strive for a better future, Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, dare I say Gaddafi, that was only in 2011, that was the French. I want to ask you how you or the people that work at NIMD expect the youth in Africa to trust you after what happened, the West did to the people that tried to bring them out of poverty, that tried to bring them out of disease, tried to bring them out of
Thank you very much. How do we win trust back? Thank you very much for your question.
Yes. Oh, there are many answers to your question.
Give one, please.
But
One,
thank you.
one answer.
It is not only by genuinely, honestly trying to support young people who want to serve their democracy, make it live. It is not only by seeing to it that we respect the principles of fair trade. It is also by accepting that decolonization involves a deep and difficult process here. After the apologies of the Dutch king, who was very much behind this all, the apologies on the slavery past of the Netherlands, after the unveiling of the statue of Tula in Curaçao, it's not over. Decolonizing our minds is a deep and complex and painful process that not only has to take place and does take place in the Caribbean side of the kingdom, it should also take place here in the Netherlands. And that goes for every of these Western countries and their relationship with Africa. You cannot be serious about supporting a democratic rule of law in African countries if you do not accept to look into the mirror and to change yourself. Let's try to become humans.
Okay, thank you. If the answer is not sufficient after this gathering, you have to talk to him again separately. Yeah. So let's go to the last one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, my compliments to all 4 speakers. 4 or 5? Yeah. It instigated a very emotion what's going on in Africa, especially decolonizing the mind. My question is actually to talk to globalization. Some years ago, globalization was a big issue and propagated. My conclusion is globalization has failed in general, in Africa in particular. Now, there are a lot of Western NGOs, including Institute for Democracy, working intensively in Africa to bring democracy or to advocate for democracy. Is this Western civil society organization are working as a right hand of globalization, which is the interest of the West, or for the common people on the ground?
Hold it there.
Thank you.
Hold it there. Thank you very much for your question. Are you guys working for the interest of Holland, or are you working for the interest of the places you work?
Working for the respect of human rights and democracy and the rule of law is certainly in the interest of the Netherlands. because working for democracy is also preventing war. And we will not tackle climate change and the management of natural resources without war if it's not in democracy and dialogue. Democracy is part of the solution here for the next decades to come.
Okay.
So, but globalization, obviously, free market has not served democracy, has not served social justice. The market doesn't do the trick. There are still some people in the Netherlands who believe so, but I would hope after next election less and less.
Thijs, I want to thank you very much. Let's give you a big applause. I want to thank you all because we can go on and on and on. I think this should only be Africa Day. We should all stay here the whole day.
Yes.
Yes, eh? Yes. Then we can have a lot to talk about. We can go deeper into it.
By the way, we only just started. And by the way, I didn't hear your first name. I'm so sorry. Ida, do you realize the richness of your mind being in at least two cultures at the same time? You can play this fantastic role in our decolonization of the minds.
Yeah. That's a good one. Thank you so much. Thank you very much and have a very good time on the Africa